Help support AMTV by becoming a patron, an AMTV staff member, and following us over on Twitter.
Hi there guys, it's Martyn here, and welcome back to another video, and today we're going to be talking about nostalgic or classic TV. Now that is definitely a corner point of this channel. You know, one of the main reasons I wanted to do YouTube or make YouTube videos was to talk about classic TV or TV that interests me, or like stories about TV. So what are we exactly discussing today? Well, it's the fact that classic or nostalgic TV is seemingly big business right now. I noticed this article on RxTV, always as I mentioned, go and check them out, but it says that Rewind TV is to launch on Freeview Channel 95. Now some of you might say, why on earth is that a big deal? Well, Rewind TV did launch earlier. It wasn't on Freeview, which is still the most, accessible service that people can use to get different channels, but it has launched on the service. That is a big step forward. Let's take a read and find out why. Rewind TV, Britain's newest independent TV channel, which aims to bring back the golden age of television, is coming to Freeview. Freeview viewers will be able to retune their TVs or boxes from around midday on Wednesday the 18th of September, so it's already happened by this point, to access the channel on Freeview Channel 95. It's going to be part of their monthly channel update, usually takes place on the third Wednesday of every month, and with the launch, Rewind TV becomes available on the UK's largest TV platform. So yes, even though we've talked about how Freeview is going to be steadily wound down, Freely's taking over, all that sort of stuff, Freeview, as it currently stands, is used by tens of millions of homes up and down the country. So to place your channel on a service like this is going to get you huge amounts of exposure, and in turn, especially with Rewind, with what it's offering, as we'll talk about a bit later, it's going to make it very popular. So what's on there, if you didn't know already? It's going to be lots of historical gems, from groundbreaking documentaries to iconic series. Curated schedule mixes light entertainment with cinematic masterpieces to bring the unexpected to today's audiences. So dramas you can find on there include The Prisoner, Jason King and the Zoo Gang, comedies like The Biederbeck Affair, Drop the Dead Donkey. It also has rare, previously unseen series like The Tony Hancock Show, which apparently hasn't been broadcast since it originally aired in 1963. That's over 60 years since people would have seen that. So the majority would never have seen it, but imagine how special that might be for, I don't know, an older viewer out there who maybe did see it in 1963 and wanted to see it again. What a treat. And, if Rewind continues to offer stuff like that, stuff that hasn't been shown in decades, then that's going to do them well. Additionally, the channel is showing Mitch, Thriller, Dick Turpin, Bust, Wurzel Gummidge Down Under, Department S, and The Charmer. Alongside entertainment, Rewind TV also screens classic factual series like Clive James Meets, Wicker's World, and World in Action. Or a lot of those names might ping bells in your head because they are bastions of classic TV for certain. And you can reconnect with your favourite stars like Judi Dench, Brian Cox, Patrick McGowan, Paul Nicholas, Richard O'Sullivan, Joanna Lumley, Richard Burton, Nigel Havers, Dave Allen, Clive James, Alan Wicker, and the formidable Mrs. Martyn, as played by Caroline Aherne. And would you believe it's not just classic TV? The main focus of the video is going to be on classic TV, but Rewind TV are also going to be commissioning some new stuff as well. Specifically, like exclusive profiles of some of the nation's most beloved TV icons. The first of which is going to be Michael Aspel, whose illustrious primetime career spanned over 7 decades. That's going to be huge, I know that for sure. So they're still making their own new stuff, which is great, but it's going to be tied back into that Rewind era, that classic era of TV. Rewind TV was founded by Oscar Buslink and Jonathan Moore, and commenting on the forthcoming Freeview launch, they said, "We're delighted by the response to Rewind TV since its launch this spring, and it's wonderful to see today's audience's enthusiasm for the golden age of television." And it really is. I mean, if you think about it, we have such an affinity with this golden age of TV, right? The classic age of TV from the 60s, the 70s, and the 80s in particular, when television really started becoming this big thing in people's households, the sort of post-war boom, more and more people were getting TVs. There was a really limited scope of channels. Of course, for a long time, it was just the BBC and ITV. You might hear people talk about, we only had 2 channels or 3 channels or 4 channels by the time Channel 4 came around. But there wasn't that much choice compared to what we have now. Far from it. Some would argue that a lot of the programs back then, not all of them, but the vast majority, were of a extremely high quality because in a sheer sense, they had to be. If they were pumping out rubbish and people weren't going to watch, that could have been diabolical, but it was quite the opposite. And as a result, generations, both from the time and even people of my generation who weren't there, discover or look back at many of these programs, these dramas, these comedies, these factual series with such an affinity, such a love, such a respect even. And it all plays into how nostalgic TV is this big business now, how a lot of people are getting back into it. You know, for as much as modern TV offers, there's a lot of people out there who say it's not the same. There's a lot more trash. There's a lot more disposable telly, a lot more telly that they don't enjoy, that isn't of a high quality, that is just trash to try and cash in on trends or make money. And, you know, the thing with television, like any sort of media that exists out there, it's all going to be subjective. Whether we like it or not, there's going to be stuff that we like that other people will not like. That is quite simply a fact of life. You know, someone might not enjoy, like I don't enjoy Love Island, for example. I literally think it's one of the worst shows on television, but there are millions out there who love it, and who am I to try and decry them for that? Just likewise with some of the dramas or some of the comedies. It's not going to fit for everyone, but particularly it seems there's been such this furore about modern TV and how it's not as good that people more and more are turning to the old stuff. In another article that touches on this from RxTV, it says, ask an older person about TV, and with their rose-tinted glasses, they'll probably tell you how much better TV was in the olden days. Now, you can see for yourself as Freeview welcomes another nostalgic TV channel to its lineup, and of course, it's going to be talking about Rewind TV, which has just recently launched on Freeview. So if you're curious, if you haven't checked out the channel yet, retune your Freeview box because it's going to be there with a host of classics for you. It's mainly going to be ITV and Channel 4 shows, it says. I don't know why there's a lack of BBC stuff on there, although I think there is going to be some BBC stuff, right? Or am I wrong? Maybe they've only got the rights to do ITV and Channel 4, who knows? Rewind, Joy's original independent vintage TV channel Talking Pictures, and a host of other channels showing nothing but archive TV. Talking Pictures has also been a success story in its own right. I remember during the pandemic in particular, it sort of experienced this boom, this renaissance, because as we were stuck at home, we were looking for things to watch, and Talking Pictures was showing all of these classic films and TV series from way back in the day. We're talking really old stuff that you know is going to be a struggle to find on physical media. It's going to be a struggle to find on certain streaming services. So Talking Pictures has really carved out that niche, and it really truly has its own little cult following, and it seems Rewind is going to fit in nicely alongside it. Archive TV channels are nothing new. UK Gold and Granada Plus led the way in the 1990s, but many of the channels originally set up to exploit the archives have morphed into something different, showing more recent programs or have abandoned wall-to-wall repeats for original programming. Meanwhile, while UK Gold and Granada Plus were linked to established broadcasters and available on pay TV platforms, the next generation of archive TV operators operate independently of the big broadcasters and are free to air. And I think that's only a positive step forward. The fact that more and more archive-based channels, the more and more archive-based content is made available on free to air, then that means only more people are going to see it. It's going to be a lot easier to access. I've heard countless stories of Doctor Who fans in the 90s who, when there were tons of repeats being shown on UK Gold, but you obviously had to get that service and it costs money and all that sort of stuff. So a step like this, making more things free to air, is going to be massive. And it ain't just the ones we've mentioned, so there's a whole thing here on Freeview's different nostalgic channels. There's Talking Pictures, as we've mentioned, launched 9 years ago, making its name showcasing old black and white films not seen since BBC Two and Channel 4 stopped showing old movies in the afternoons. And yes, that was a thing back in the day. BBC Two and Channel 4 in the afternoons would show old movies, often from the black and white era, even then. And it was a great opportunity for many of these films that had either been forgotten or they were hidden gems or indeed some classics to be rediscovered. So the fact that Talking Pictures is doing that on a 24-hour basis is big. Its schedule now also includes classic series such as Rumpole of the Bailey and Scotland Yard. I think that's great that they've expanded into TV as well. Keeps it fresh, keeps it alive, but still maintaining that ethos of it being from that black and white era. You have That's TV, which is on Freeview channels 56, 65 and 71. It's spread across 3 channels. That's TV is an eclectic mix of vintage music, documentaries and entertainment shows. Schedules are more haphazard and they're often only confirmed days before transmission. Currently, That's TV is showing Goodnight Sweetheart, Steptoe and Son, and Rising Damp. Newer shows, relatively speaking, are Little Britain, Life on Mars, and Benidorm. So, you know, newer shows, I mean, that's still stuff from the 2000s, stuff that is at least, 15 or in some cases 20 years old. It really asks that question as well. How long does something have to go before it's considered classic or nostalgic? Is it more about the impact it has on the culture? I mean, like, whether you liked it or hated it, Little Britain, as controversial as it may seem now, was a really big deal. So how long do we go? Relatively speaking, yes, those shows are modern, they're in colour, etc. Some might even be in HD, but it seems that TV also have those classic shows in black and white, in 4:3, for you to enjoy as well. We have Rewind TV, which we've talked about as well, how the schedules have classic entertainment each evening, older movies overnight, and a strand of factual shows in the afternoon, which seems like a really good way to structure it if you ask me. Shows like Surgical Spirit, Watching, Drop the Dead Donkey, The Prisoner, and the Judi Dench sitcom A Fine Romance. Then you have Challenge. Now, I'm a big fan of Challenge, a very unapologetic fan of Challenge, which shows a lot of classic game shows. It's become a staple of classic TV schedules. You won't find them on the above channels because Sky's Challenge channel is still the exclusive home as much of ITV's biggest quiz shows of yesterday. Look what you could have won on Bullseye. Have a go at the Gold Run in Blockbusters. That's right, a lot of those game shows you're not going to find on other TV channels, you're not going to find on streaming services, you're going to find it on Challenge. And yes, it has a lot of ITV's biggest, like Millionaire as well. There were some BBC stuff I saw start to appear. I'm certain they've started showing episodes of like Pointless, which I know is relatively modern. They're also showing episodes of Anne Robinson's The Weakest Link as well. So if you're into game shows, particularly classic game shows, you got to get Challenge, man. You got to get on that hype. You have BBC 4, and now a few years ago, the BBC announced its intention to convert BBC 4 into an archive channel. That still hasn't fully happened. The channel's schedule still occasionally reflects its original arts and culture remit, with Young Musician and Proms performances screening there. But look more closely for occasional visits to the BBC's shiny floor shows of the 80s, like Wogan, repeats of classic BBC dramas, and of course, classic Top of the Pops every Friday night. So yes, BBC 4, has it become the archive channel the BBC want it to be yet? Not fully. And the more I think about it, whilst it will be a shame to lose those original programmes, I do think more and more the way we're going, letting the BBC have a channel or a service that is strictly archived, that is specifically their huge back catalogue of old content, is a really good idea. Having a whole one-stop shop of the BBC's classic programming, it's not all going to be there, but having a good variety, that might be really useful in the, online digital streaming age. So those are the channels you can get on Freeview. Just to summarize, you can get Talking Pictures, you can get That's TV, you can get Rewind, you can get Challenge, and you can get BBC 4. But to close off, it says, what happened to those original classic TV channels? In the early days of satellite TV, the main broadcasters set up their own channels recycling classic dramas, soaps and films. The BBC and Thames Television jointly set up UK Gold. Meanwhile, later in the 90s, ITV's Northwest station Granada launched Granada Plus. Over the decades, UK Gold ultimately morphed into Comedy Channel Gold, with its sister channels in the network focusing on newer, as in post-2000, shows and original productions. Granada Plus made way for ITV3. While ITV3 is still the home for some older shows, its primetime schedule consists of mostly post-2000 shows, clearing the path for independent stations to hoover up those older programmes. Now, there could be a whole litany of reasons why channels that were originally archived moved away from that. First of all, things post-2000s, they're more likely to be in the 16:9 format, which is just commonplace. 4:3 on a flat screen is not awful, but there will be some viewers who won't tune in. It's like the whole black and white thing. There are some viewers who don't want to tune in just because something's black and white. It's weird, but it's a thing. Also, it could be down to rights. Back in the day, contracts were signed. Trying to get things on streaming or repeats might mean paying the actors involved or the creatives involved. That could become very expensive. So I kind of get why they show more in that sense. But these classic channels, Rewind, Talking Pictures, they've been able to make a killing off of showing the stuff that things like ITV3 and Gold don't want to show anymore. And I'm just really glad, ultimately, that these classic programs still have a place on UK TV because, there was a point a few years ago where I was really thinking, are we going to get to a point where the whole nature of archive content or like a channel just showing classic programming is going to go out the window? Are we fully going to kick over to just showing newer stuff? So the fact that Rewind launched and has seemingly done so well enough that it's now on Freeview on this big platform accessed by tens of millions of people, the fact that more channels are skewing towards archive content, the fact there's such variety of archive content you can find now, and even on the big streaming sites like BBC iPlayer has different classic films you can watch as well and TV series. So, my fears can be set aside because it very much seems that, nostalgic classic TV from yesteryear, from this so-called golden age, is very much alive and well. I think this can only be a good thing. I don't think this deters from, new programming. I always say you definitely need new programming in the mix as well. You've got to get new original programming that can become classic. You've got to get new things that are going to capture the audiences. And, that's what those main channels are for. That's why you'll see them on BBC One or ITV1 or Channel 4. So having archive content as part of your brand, as part of your network, as part of your whatever, is going to be a key aspect going forward. And I'm so glad to see that it has been embraced, seemingly with open arms. But that is all for this video. I just wanted to talk about this because I think it's something really positive, particularly as someone who enjoys classic TV and, you know, the sense of archiving and stuff like that. Leave a like on the video if you enjoyed it, and let me know your thoughts in the comments as well. What do you think about this sort of renaissance of nostalgic TV? Subscribe to the channel if you're new as well, because we'd love to have you aboard here with us. In the meantime, I've been Adam Martyn from AMTV. Thank you for joining me, and I'll see you next time. Thank you to our patrons for helping to support the show, and a special thank you to Macra, Bruce Danton, Derek Chambers, Shaun Knock, Daud Khan, Liam De-Maine, Trev Hughes, Ajmac 200017, Deck, Evan Hart 41, Jen, Traffy, Tim Ripley, Mr. Eurovision 1986, Ted Elliott, Marnanel Thurman, John Wakefield, Kieran Bolton, and 40-something Manchild, our AMTV staff members.